My team, thanks for coming. For people who don't know me, I'm Austin Rotter. I'm an account supervisor on the core tech team. Been here for almost 4 years, and most of my clients are on the digital side of things. So anything from apps, platforms, ad tech companies, cloud, you name it, I kind of have some hand or function in it. So I really just want to talk about like tech media 101. I know tech could be sometimes scary or intimidating, but it's not. There's just different ways and approaches to go about it. If you guys have any questions throughout, raise your hand, interrupt me. Cool. I still want to ramble for a while, but so I think the biggest question I get across the board all the time: what makes a good tech story? It's a battle I have with clients, not a battle, but an ongoing conversation I have with clients on a daily basis, and things that I get asked throughout the agency a lot. So I think before we go really into that, like, mind you the awesome stock images I've been using throughout. But yeah, so just what makes a story? I think, first of all, when a lot of it when you come out is launching. You have a company that's in beta. They're about to launch their first app, their first platform, their first product. Launch is probably one of the biggest endeavors you guys will take on as a client, and it's also one of the most exciting because there's so much back material you have to do. We're launching a client in 2 weeks. I can't really go too much into detail on it, but really cool do-it-yourself enterprise app store with also a build service. So just for a quick background on it, I know it sounds like kind of technical and a little boring, but it's actually pretty cool. So it's for SMBs, which is small to medium-sized businesses, and middle market companies. They could create like an in-house app store. So for 5W, we have Harvest and a few other services we use for like back-end employee stuff, but now you could, at the same time, we have it on our phone or a desktop. It might not be secure, or if an employee leaves, they still might have access and all that stuff. There's a lot of security issues just on a lot of it, but with this is you could create your own in-house app store. So it's all pre-approved apps for pre-approved employees, and they could use it. And also on the cool end of things, for more tech-savvy companies, where talking about 5app chain. If they have like an app that they want to build, but they don't have, like there's not an app for it, you could build it too for your employees to use for various things. So really, before we're launching, we've been the last 2 months, countless calls, brainstorming, strategy, messaging, thinking about just SEO type words, and really making sure that before we launch, yeah, it's great for all the media and everything that we're going to do. If everything else isn't lined up and taken care of, something silly as we're doing the guys like LinkedIn page and bios and headshots, and making sure that's right, because come press day, it's not like, oh wait, we need this. We need, like, we'll talk about this more, but again, I think the launch is super important, but the pre-launch is just as important, if not more important. So also updates, new features, all that stuff is, again, makes a really cool announcement. If you have an app and they're finally rolling out a new feature, or a platform's adding a new service, especially for a little bit more established, middle-sized startups and companies. I'm trying to think, like one of our clients, DigitalOcean, they were in the process of announcing one of their new features, and again, it's so cool. Again, it keeps a conversation relevant, and it's cool to see the progress and progression of a company. So that's always a good feature. Makes for good news and a good announcement. One of my favorite announcements, and it's always good to see a company grow, is funding. I think for an announcement to be really cool, anything like 6 figures and higher is usually good. Again, a lot of tech sites love funding. It just shows growth in that. Yeah, the idea and concept of what you're doing is being solidified by actual investors and people who believe and want to grow in that. Again, one of probably tech's biggest funding stories we've ever done was DigitalOcean. I'm probably going to hear about them a lot, so bear with. They raised $37.2 million from Andreessen Horowitz, which was just a massive story, and we'll talk about later on about exclusives versus embargoes, but 25 pre-embargoed stories on launch day of that announcement. So funding could be really cool. It's also cool if you like launch a company, and also some of this could go hand in hand where you could launch a company with funding. So in our client we had AppWiz, which is a publishing platform for, on the mobile side they launched with $1.4 million. So again, it makes the story sexy. Hiring is always a good one. Any key hires, new CEO, CMO, CFO, any C-suite, a new creative director, stuff like that. I think especially for trades, and again, we'll talk about the importance of trades, but hiring is also another cool thing. It just shows growth. It shows consistency in how the team or the group, platform, service, whatever it is, it's just constantly growing and evolving, really making moves for their end goal. And then my favorite is that little handshake guy, is any acquisitions or partnerships, mergers, etc. One of our clients in the big data CRM space, Zeta Interactive, we've probably done like 2 or 3, 4 different acquisition announcements in the last 6, 8 months. So they're just growing rapidly. They're bringing on other companies to help build and expand upon their vision and stuff like that. Any questions, thoughts, before I keep going? Okay. So this is where it gets fun. The strategy behind it. What the difference is between an exclusive and an embargo. Clients ask that a lot, team asks that a lot, I think. So exclusive, obviously, self-explanatory, it's where you give one outlet the first crack at a story. An embargo is you kind of start dropping the information to a few different people prior. So embargo is a little bit trickier where there's so many different moving parts between our team, our client, and then all the different reporters to make sure everything's aligned, and I'll explain how to really pitch an embargo story, which could get a little complicated and tricky with just some outlets like to break embargoes, and it happens, but 9 out of 10 times, or 9.9 out of 10 times, it won't happen, so don't worry about it. But so an embargo is, say you pick a date, next Tuesday, 10 a.m. we're going to launch. A week or so prior, you're going to start letting the news out to reporters, kind of like a close, intimate, like you don't give them the whole scoop of the story until they agree upon the embargo and really want to start diving into it, but it's kind of like, hey, client X, Y, and Z is about to do X, Y, and Z. Everything's under embargo until this date. Thought you might be interested, like would you want to jump on a call, and then we can kind of give you the nitty-gritty of everything. So it's an interesting strategy on both fronts, and there's always a lot of debate on what is more effective, what isn't more effective, and why people do it. I don't personally really like exclusives unless it's something, how to explain it? Like embargoes, I think it's a good strategy to implement if you have like a really cool announcement where why water it down with just one source? Like I'd rather have the biggest bang for our buck. Back to DigitalOcean and the embargo with the funding, we had 25 pre-embargoed stories lined up on announcement day. So stuff like that's great, but exclusives are always cool too. Just I think if you have a really good a reporter and outlet have a really good relationship with a client, and they're doing something pretty cool and interesting, or it might not be like the greatest announcement. It might sex it. It might make it a little bit more sexier and impactful, like hey, you get the first crack at it. And it's always good to do that every once in a while. Give the reporters are dying for exclusives, and they always like to feel special. And again, shows our clients that we do have those intimate one-on-one relationships, and that they could. And so but personally, I think for most announcements, I like doing the embargo, but you get the biggest bang for your buck. And come day, especially for tech, and so say a story hits at 10 o'clock, you have the exclusive run, 10 o'clock, then you guys start pitching at 10:01, the news is already old, which like in tech world, like it's so hyper sped up, where the second it's out and reporters then learn about it at 10:01, realistically they're probably not looking at their emails till 11, 11:30, 12, 1, whatever, just they're doing a bunch of things. Then they could jump on a call maybe 5 or 6 that day, and the client can't do it till the next day at 10 a.m. So now their whole 24 hours behind the story is just old, and 24 hours might not seem a lot to me or you guys, but in the tech world, it's like a month, or probably for longer, where it's like the story, unless it's something really major like Apple or Facebook, or like a tier 1.
Something to add to that too is with an exclusive, like sometimes the reporter will drag you along, like if it's not exactly on your timeline, because they're the only ones with the story. It's like, sorry, I couldn't get to it today, but, and then it's just like you're following up, it's like, hey, is that coming today? And they're like, yeah, definitely this afternoon, and it just like keeps going down the, you know, whereas an embargo, they don't want to be late, and so they'll almost always agree, like Austin said. Then some people will break it, and they don't usually get mad at us, they get mad at the other outlet.
Yeah, I was gonna say on that point for exclusive, I've had that happen to me before where we had an exclusive lined up for Monday at so and so time, like everyone's pumped, the client's like has their whole team ready like for inbound stuff, and it's just like, oh, the reporter's now at like an event, or they had like another breaking news story, and like, ugh. So then it get pushed back, and then you're playing the game of like, hey, when's it running, and then it might look like just media to us, but at the same time, like it's affecting a whole company's bottom line, and they have a lot riding on than just like one story. So I think it's looking at that where, for a business, like what makes the most sense for them to give them the biggest bang for the buck, and kind of going back to this, it's just realizing like what is the best strategy for each. Like for a new hire, I think an exclusive's usually like a good bet, and then start going a little bit wider. Again, it's not like, unless you're hiring like some major hire from like a really reputable company and bringing them in, that's going to do some amazing things. That's exclusive, like funding, a launch, an update, or a partnership or acquisition. I always like to go for the embargo, just because again, you're not doing that whole last minute like, wait, is it going to go up, is it not going to go up? It's just, you have all your ducks in a row.
If somebody's stringing you along, can you just say, I'm giving it to somebody else then?
There's always a fine line.
Fire under there, or?
It's knowing your client and the reporter. If it's a really good, like DigitalOcean, heck, and some other clients hold a little bit more weight than others. Just, I think every client's address is important, but it just in terms of like the media side of things, I think some hold a little bit more weight. Like obviously, like just I'll start using clients, but like a Facebook, for example, it's a really bad example, but like they hold the weight. You know, like everyone wants to cover, but if you reach out to a reporter, hey, you have the exclusive, and then they're kind of like playing the dance of like, oh, well, I have this, and this to do. Then I think you could pull the move where you're like, all right, well, I'm gonna start shopping this around. And I think once you do that, then it can also backfire. Like, all right, move on. I think it's just knowing your client and having their relationship. If like, I think if you just explain to the reporter like, hey, like we really need to get this out. Give them a little bit of leeway to realize that they have other things going on besides this one little thing, especially in tech. Like breaking news just trumps everything, and it's all, a lot of it's about page views and being the first to jump on something. It's like from like one of like the bigger companies. So there's a lot of variables. There's not like a right or wrong answer or like a formula to it, but I usually like to give them 24 hours or like a few back and forth. Like, listen, like I know what's up. Like 1,000 other things. Like, we really glad that you're taking this on, we want to work, but like, can you make some realistic time frame that we can work to make sure like it's good on both ends? But that's always like the tricky one. We have the exclusive and it's locked in, agreed upon, and then it just gets pushed back. But there's ways around it, and to figure out, it's just a matter of like, it's on a situational basis, which is like annoying, but it's true. So, so I guess like the question is, I always get asked like, how long of a lead time? That's something we're working on with another client. How long of a lead time do you need to really start pitching a story? Again, I think it depends on the story. I think a launch of like a demo and platform, there's a lot of testing involved and back and forth and demoing. I personally like 2 weeks, so that's 10 business days. Really hardcore embargoes. A lot of demoing prior. There's a ton of different ways to do it. If your clients in New York and reporters in New York, always push for an in-person demo. There's a lot of times when we do demos over the phone, and some of this stuff, especially on the tech side, it's so complicated. A lot of it's like very back-end dev enterprise stuff that it could be over a lot of people's heads, so it could get lost in translation on the call, and that's when like the piece comes out and you get the client always responds like, they didn't understand what we did. So I think anytime you got that face-to-face for a demo, push it 10 out of 10 times. They'll just make everything go smoother. They'll really see the nuances, and I think with everyone, we like to actually have like a tangible feel and touch of stuff. Funding announcements always could go a little bit quicker, like 3 to 4 or 5 days, a new hire, 2 days, acquisitions and partnerships, 2 to 3 days, that's a little bit more like quick pace, breaking news type stuff. But again, for launches and feature updates and more like the company stuff, I like 2 weeks just to really play around, and also the tech gods always will have other things to say. Just when you're testing a platform, you learn that there's going to be kinks, there's going to be bugs, so I'd rather have a little extra time so we work out with it again. So when you do launch, you're not driving traffic to an app that's subpar or a site that might be down, especially for launch stuff. You really only have one shot at launching. It's kind of like a first date where you go on a date and it's awful. You're not going to be like, oh, I'm going to call Jim again and go hang out. You're like, no. So kind of like an app or platform, like,
No.
I don't know why Jim and a guy. But yeah, for app or platform, you really have
You're
one
not calling Jim again.
chance, so I want to make sure it's right. And again, it goes back to just knowing clients and having that relationship where it's not just media, it's more about counsel and talking about what makes the most sense and having the best bang for a buck. In terms of days and times, I'm always a big fan of Tuesdays or Wednesdays. Monday, stuff can get lost in the shuffle. Thursday, it's not bad, but it's not optimal. And Friday, it's just, I've had stuff run on Fridays for different announcements, but I just like to avoid Fridays altogether. Another big thing for times is I like 10 a.m. just on a preference and also from a metric standpoint. It's a lot of it's funny, if you follow different companies, like outlets on Twitter or check their sites, you'll see like the 7:30 a.m. embargo breaks, the 8, the 9, and there's like a few 10s, and you'll see like there's, besides you guys launching, there's probably 5 or 6 other companies launching, so you're all fighting for the same space and length of attention from the consumers and from the media. So I like to try to find like a nice time. Again, it's never going to be 100% right, because there's always companies that just do things. And again, I think it's really checking out like the top 20 tech companies, like a Facebook, Microsoft, Google, Twitter, LinkedIn, IBM, HP, Nokia, whatever, and making sure that no one else is doing something, making sure like there's not like a big conference event or someone's dropping a new phone or hardware or gadget, but you know everyone's going to be there. And looking at it again, I think it's just knowing, taking it back and then telling clients that like we were launching something, but this week was Apple's developer conference, and we're like, hey, just to be completely transparent, like everyone's going to be there. Everyone is writing about it. It's going to own Twitter, it's going to own media, it's going to own media. There's no point of launching it. It's just going to be for a waste. So I think I think clients will really appreciate that at the end of the day, if they come to us for that guidance and counsel and making sure from a strategic standpoint, I think it goes a super long way in the long run.
Do you find that tech companies, like print media, like say you give an exclusive to the Times, and it's just online, do they care about print media at all? Because it's like Mashable, TechCrunch.
Yes and no, and this always goes into like a much more holistic conversation that I'm about. Is print dead and print print versus digital.
About it?
I mean, print's always great, just from that like brand recognition, like there's always something about like, holding a paper or magazine and then like look, like I made it, hanging up on the wall. So like from there, that's like there's a lot of value in print. A lot of my clients love print, and I always try to push it. But I think from that the customer acquisition strategy, especially if you have a digital platform, being digital makes the most sense. Like when was the last time you actually read a paper, article, you're like, oh, this service or app or this platform looks really cool. Now let me go on my computer and type in the URL. Like probably, unless it's like really awesome and you really want to check it out, probably never. But you're reading a quick article, like, oh, this looks cool, click the link. Like, so the conversion rate on digital, I think for a lot of platforms and apps, it's so much quicker and easier. But yeah, for a lot of my clients, I like to push as much digital as possible, but at the same time, TV too. TV is just as important. I think it's having a really well-rounded campaign, and that goes then into like the awards and conferences. But again, that's something that all comes over time. But I think for like initial launch, I prefer like 70% digital strategy, like right out the gate for all like the link building from the SEO and the social strategy, and also from like a customer acquisition strategy of getting those initial customers in. But print is very important. Not going like print's dead, like, it's not. But yeah.
I just didn't know if your clients would like demand a New York Times print feature when they're a digital platform, if they'd be like, if they're happy with Mashable or something. But I get it.
It's on a situational basis, but yeah, print's always good. But I prefer digital just because again that easy click over of just clicking a link, boom, you're there, kind of thing. So again, I think really the big thing is like pre-launch prep work. We talked about the time. I like 5 to 10 business days, more the better, just to really make sure. Again, but you don't want to go too long and do 3 weeks because a reporter, you talk to a reporter day 1 out of 15. Come day 15, they already probably covered like 30 to 40, 50 other stories, and they're forgetting about you. So I think that week to week and a half, 2 weeks tops, really good length. A big thing is a few days before you're going to launch, do like an hour demo with your client. Pretend you're a reporter and ask them like 8 to 10 pre-approved questions your team makes, and do like that walking run through. Like pretend you're a reporter and just ask them questions. So again, when the day comes that they are launching and they are doing interviews, it's second nature and they can do it in their sleep and there's no surprises. I like to be a little bit more aggressive on it and ask a little bit more like in-depth probing questions that a reporter might just skim the surface on, because if they can answer our stuff, when it comes to the more back-end, hard-ass questions, they already have the answer. It's second nature. They're comfortable, and I think especially for a startup, it might be their first time talking to media and doing interviews, so repetition is extremely key. Some collateral things. Test Flight's a great platform to test apps and send things over, so you can send to reporters under embargo so they could play with it on their own. And all that good stuff. Just some other little simple things. Again, it's not too much you need. Really on my end, I like to do just make sure you have high-res screenshots, because a lot of times that's going to be the artwork they use in the pieces. I try to pull things from the client's website. Again, it's all about repetition, brand building, and awareness, where the images that they use on certain components or sectors on their site, they'll be then using it in the print, in the media. So again, you see it there, you see it there. It's just that repetition and keep building. Then just little things like executive bios, headshots. Collateral's pretty obviously the title press release. For really going into depth, I like to then do talking points or just messaging, where I always like to explain to a client, where like, if someone's holding a gun to your head and you have 30 seconds to explain what your platform is, go. Then I'll do one, all right, if you have a minute, explain it. All right, now if you have 2 minutes, explain it. And if you have 5 minutes, explain it. Because when you talk to reporters, everyone's going to have different schedules. So you want to make sure you're getting the same messaging and the same story out to the same group of people, but in different timelines. Like one reporter might talk like, hey, I'm going to do a quick 10-minute demo, that's it. Or hey, I have an hour to like really dive deep. So again, the 10-minute thing might be a really short version of it, and a lot of things could be left out. So much to go into in tech, but if you have that 10-minute speech down pat, then you could kill the hour speech, and vice versa. So, and I think in the prep time loading up to launch, that's all stuff you could practice with your clients and your team. And it's also good on your end, where there's so many times a reporter might call you and ask you 4 questions that if you know off the top of your head, you don't have to bug your client or have them ask, and you're just a little bit more knowledgeable. Because I know a lot of times on the tech side, they get really annoyed when they, hey, what's up with this feature, or is it going to be done? Like, oh, well, let me put you to so-and-so over at client. I was like, wait, why? So I think the more you know on your end, it's just a better prepared, and it also makes your pitching easier, because you can really find a cool way to dive into it that they might not have seen to begin with. This is always probably another question I get asked a lot is just some tech outlets. Again, this is very basic, just like tech 101 type outlets. There's a ton more to go through, but like for like a big exclusive or a launch thing, obviously Wall Street Journal and New York Times and that stuff aren't on there, but and they do have an amazing tech section that cover a lot of startups. But I think for stuff like this, for like really hardcore tech, startup app stuff, this is kind of like a holy grail. There's obviously a lot more like mobile sites and stuff, and we'll talk about that in trades. This is where it gets kind of creepy. Just friendly reporters to know. Again, I get it. There's certain outlets where certain people are a little bit more receptive, and just also good people know that they, again, I think the biggest thing in tech is building those relationships. And I'm on Twitter. I run Twitter nonstop on the side of my computer, where following news, stories, talking to reporters. I pitch a lot on Twitter. I also just have conversations in BS with reporters about anything from tech to, unfortunately, me being a Mets and Jets and Knicks fan. So there's a lot of in between. These are people I normally like talking to. They're also normal people that I think are a little bit more receptive to pitching than others. Again, not to say that it's a slam dunk and not what I'm saying, but again, I think the key for all of this, especially, use Twitter to your advantage. A lot of you guys use Twitter for PR and use your job in general? Yes, it's like a serious question.
Oh, yeah.
I've gotten some of my craziest stories just from pitching and on Twitter and just starting relationships with them and talking with them. And again, not saying that you should pitch all the time on Twitter, but saying like you have like, I see a lot of other people that do have like, their feed is just PR and pitching. It's like, okay, so instead of going from mass mailing, now you're mass tweeting, which is always not, I'm saying everyone can see it. Then emails, no one can see who it's going to, but Twitter, like, all right, you just hit up 20 people in like 2 minutes, like, we get it. You're working on a story. Yeah.
Sorry, question. When you're pitching a reporter on Twitter, do you usually send them a direct message, or do you write it in your status and tag them in the post? Or
it really depends. If they follow me, I'll DM them like something super casual, like, hey, I'm working on something, X, Y, and Z is about to launch, or so-and-so just hired someone, or so-and-so got funding, like, thought you might be into it, want to chat.
So you message them direct, so that's like a direct message?
If they follow me. If not, sometimes I'll tweet back at them, like, hey, I want to shoot you a quick message, can you follow me so I can DM you? Or also, Twitter's a great resource to find reporters' email addresses. A lot of times, like my ACs or AEs or interns are like, hey, so-and-so's not on Cision. Cision's great, and I'm glad we have it, but it's not perfect by any stretch of imagination, not knocking Cision Plus. But like a lot, I'm just showing, for example, like Laura's emails there, Kate's emails there, Harrison has a link there. So yeah, Lauren. So a lot of their times they'll have it. If they don't have it in their bio, just scroll down like 20 or 30 tweets. I know it sounds a little bit like stalkerish or creepy, and that's not my intention. But they also have conversation with other people. They're like, hey, here's my email address. So do your due diligence on Twitter. I find a lot of times you can find some really cool contacts and hard to find email addresses that way. Yeah, I'm a big component of that. Don't use LinkedIn to pitch, by the way. Media hate that. I get asked that a lot.
That's so weird because we get on our side, people say yes to LinkedIn.
What do you mean?
I get email addresses through LinkedIn.
Yeah. I pitched
Maybe
to
it's different
LinkedIn.
for maybe in tech.
Maybe I'm sure it's worked in the past. I'm not saying don't. I just know like my encounters with tech.
That's how I
They don't like LinkedIn, or if you're friends with them on Facebook.
Yeah,
Like again, I try to put it in my way where like if I'm friends with someone on Facebook and they started like private messaging me about like a favor, I'll be like, okay, you obviously have my email address, which is like preferred to like do something like this, or like call me or text me now. Like I don't know. It's so again, I think it's just like a personal thing, but like I normally don't like Twitter. I'm a big fan of, obviously email, but The other platforms I kind of just like to leave to more personal, one-on-one, and leave like the work stuff alone. But again, that's just me. I'm sure it works for other people other ways, but just my personal things. This is my favorite picture of the whole PowerPoint slide. I really want to have this a growth chart, like a generic growth chart, so bear with me. This is my biggest thing that I try to stress to my team and clients of how do we gain users in non-traditional forms, in terms of media, that is. I'm in constant calls, meetings with every client wants the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, TechCrunch, Nashville. Given, and that's something that we're great at doing, but there's so many other ways to implement strategies through media that can get that same result, if not better. Where we've had a lot of clients where we finally got them into TechCrunch or that big feature in the Wall Street Journal, like we've gained 4 users. And I'm using this as an example for mostly platforms and apps, so bear with me. And some of it makes sense. Obviously you need to be, I think it's really knowing your client and what their goal is. If they're launching and one of their big things is looking for investors or an eventual exit and purchase, then being like in the venture beat, the TechCrunch is, Recodes. Tech is going to be super important from that brand building and having that credibility in the tech side. So when a VC or possible company goes to Google them, like, oh cool, I've seen them in Recode, I've seen them in VentureBeat, they were in Pando Daily, they were in the Next Web, and that's what they want to see. But I think you do get a lot of users from the tech site, but at the same time, think about your average reader who reads those tech sites. They're pretty tech savvy people who just are engulfed within the space, so they're maybe not really looking for these services or platforms, and the conversion might be low where they'll, oh, this is cool, this is a cool idea, but like, what's the engagement level? But at the same time, I ask where I go to trades and regional. I think regional TV is, and papers and radio is the most underrated tactic you could do for an app and platform. We used to have this client called Grapevine. It's a CRM customer service platform. So they use that harnesses social media. So think about how many times you've been on hold with AT&T, an airline, a utilities company, whatever, and you're like, I want to kill myself trying to get through to someone, and they hang up on me or they move me to so-and-so. Now you could use Grapevine and start like this little mini forum, and after certain times of people complaining and starting the conversation, they then message the account rep for Verizon or whatever, like, hey, you have all these unresolved gripes, like, you should probably be looking into this. So they really help out the consumer, but how that problem's happened to what? Probably almost everyone in the country. Not just the tech savvy individuals. So our big focus on launch was we had a really cool co-founder. He was Dave Carroll, United Brakes guitar guy. Quick little backstory on him. United Airlines broke his guitar, and they wouldn't refund him the money. He was in a band. He made a song called "United Airlines Broke My Guitar." Within, I think, 24 to 48 hours, had like 1.4 million views on YouTube. And then United was like, we should probably talk to this guy. It actually made their stock go down a bit, and now he launched, off of that, he launched his platform. He was like, there's a million Dave Carroll-like stories throughout the country. So it's not just the TechCrunch readers who want that, it's the mom in Alabama, the college student in Florida. So a lot of what we did with them and a few of our platforms that are a little bit more on the consumer end was a lot of regional TV. Again, it's not the sexiest approach. I don't think a founder will call his wife or mom like, hey, I was on ABC Florida today. But from that, again, that user acquisition strategy, it's huge because now you're reaching an audience that's super engaging and begging and looking for platforms like this, and you're just punching them in the face with it, which is like, for me, we saw such huge traffic numbers after the first few months where a lot of those outlets on TV, even though your founder or whoever's leading the media push, they might be in New York or wherever, a lot of the times these outlets are more than happy to Skype, which was great. So a lot of times we did close to like 8 to 10 a month regional TV segments, along with the other stuff. Again, it wasn't a huge focus, but it was a focus to supplement. So from the VC brand building side, we had a lot of the tech stuff from that visibility, but then from the consumer awareness and getting new users, we had a lot of the regional. I think together it made a really nice mix of both. Also trades. Trades are super important. Again, it might not be the biggest outlets, it might have 5, 10, 15, 20,000 readers, but it's super important for a company or client or whatever the service is to be recognized by the trades. I'd much rather have a small trade publication do a huge feature on my client where it's 10,000 cert, but you know out of the 10,000, 9,000 people are reading it and are into it and they're super targeted to it, than having a New York Times feature where maybe 20 or 30 people looked at it or read it or even cared. And again, I think it's going back to your clients and explain that strategy to them. And it might be it might be harder to others to talk about it, but it really, again, from like that strategy standpoint and building that client trust and consultation goes such a long way. So like I'm a biggest fan of trade media and especially regional. And again, it shouldn't be the bulk of a campaign, but as a supplement and as a side, it really should be there. I think the biggest thing I keep stressing is really well-rounded, and that first month, learning what your client's goals are in the first 6 months, 6 months, year, 2 years. They might not know, which is ask someone, hey, what are you going to do in 2 years? Who knows? But a lot of these companies that you're launching and working with, a lot of them have a somewhat of a strong roadmap. And again, that's going to change based on what we do, what they do. Again, plans are always great because there's always an eraser to fine tune and work with it. But it's just learning what works, what their end goal is, and finding ways to do it. So I think with regional and trade as a side note to that goes a super long way and extremely important. I think that's the end of my beautiful slideshow. I feel I've been rambling for a while. Is there any questions that you kind of want to open up just a chat about? I know obviously my team has a ton of tech, but I feel like as an agency as a whole, which is really great, there's so much tech floating through it now, especially on the consumer team and health and beauty. There's a lot of cool apps, platforms, e-commerce sites, and every company is obviously digging into tech in some way or another. And there's a lot of different ways to go about it. So, any questions or things you want to chat about? You guys have any questions on like releases or pitches?
Yeah, I've got one about this. So like when you're saying, so like you're trying to, to figure out your brief and your client, you're asking the questions that, like a reporter would ask. So like, do you have like a basic template of like questions in mind that you like to kind of field? So that way, because sometimes those questions reoccur. I mean, obviously it's going to differ.
Yeah,
on the outlet,
there's a few. I think the biggest glaring one, and most clients will never admit it, who are your 3 biggest competitors? Everyone's always saying like, we're the first up. And there are a lot of like only ones who are doing it, but I think finding from the get-go who are their 3 or 4 main competitors, or if they're looking at from a media landscape, who would they eventually want to become? It could be a direct competitor, it could be someone in the space, or again, I think that also hones in on your media tactics, because you could see what they did, what worked for them, and I'm not saying mimic it, but there could be some similarities and ideas that they could throw out. Again, like the competitors is always the biggest thing, and I think this is a real simple question of why are you doing this? Not from like obviously from a dollar and cent sign, but like, what does this solve? Why should anyone care? What are you doing? Why this idea? So if you're launching a hamburger shop, really bad example, it's not tech, but like if you're launching a hamburger stand, why are you not doing hot dogs, or why are you not doing ice cream? Again, I think that's for anything and not just tech. Kind of want to open up a little bit besides tech, but again, for tech, I think really think why are you doing this specific thing? And maybe there's a cool backstory to it, where we had this one client updater, which it helps you, when you move, it changes all your addressing information, which is a huge hassle. This guy was a really high-end lawyer making 6 figures plus a year at a very prestigious law firm, was moving from the Upper East Side to the West Side, and was like, this process is atrocious. Quit his job and start this platform. Which is a cool story, and kind of like a grapevine, where he found this huge need that impacted him, and he started this platform. There might be some really cool backstories. Maybe it impacted their kids, or there's a past childhood story. Then it gives you a whole new set of angles and ideas to really dive into. And then again, it's on a case-by-case basis, but I think like those two things, or like if there was 5 questions, those are always my first 2. Like I really want to figure out like from the jump. And also, what's the exit point? What is the end goal? Some of them might not have it. Yeah, that helped.
What's your take on sending images of like updates? You prefer doing that? Like,
What do you
so like let's say you have any upgrades for like a platform or whatever
Yeah.
app. Obviously, you probably want to send images to show like for an exclusive. Like how many images
Yeah.
would you recommend sending? You don't want to bombard them with that plus the email and everything.
2, I don't send images on the first shot. That's like after the conversation's going, like I always put like, hey, I have a ton of images, could shoot them over to you, just like, their inbox is probably cluttered and inundated and huge to begin with. And you don't want to start sending these huge wonky files where like, shit, you just crashed their system, or like, now their email's backed up for a half hour, so it's always just like a common courtesy thing that I always like to do is, like after I email 2 or 3, then do it, instead of just like right up the gate, right?
Yeah, I got another one. So say you're, you got a story that's under embargo, you're pitching. You have a release ready. What do you find reporters might be more receptive to? Pasting the release in the body of the email, attaching it, or just teasing it until they ask for it?
Yeah, tease it. Never give your release, again, it goes back to like the images thing, in the first email, never give an embargoed release just because, again, they never agreed to it. You don't know what's going on. Like, they could just take your story and run with it, especially if it's like a pretty cool announcement, especially like as big as like a huge funding round or a really big hire. So I would like to tease it and be like, hey, if you're cool with the embargo, I can send you the full release, images or whatever, like, and then we can go from
so you're
there.
going wide with it, then what you found was better, like 2 methods? Copy and pasting, or is that?
Yeah, I would put it at the bottom. Again, I know still like sending attachments just because, again, now it's like 2 steps for them to do where it's like, they have to look at your email, then read it, then hit the attachment, wait for it to open, where it's like, cool, this is what they're doing, this is when it's happening, oh shit, here's the release. It's just like a natural progression. Yeah.
How can you use Twitter in your favor? And because wouldn't after a while it become annoying for someone to always like be tweeting at you or to always be?
Yeah, again, I think it's just knowing how often. It's just like a discretion of everything, where don't use it, like don't abuse it, because then you just look like a spam bot who's just using Twitter to do it. But it's on a case by case basis. Don't do it. There's people I see where it's just again like their whole Twitter feed is just tweeting at reporters, and it's like, oh, don't do that. Just because like, again, everyone can see what you're doing, and also if you're talking about your client, then your client can see what you're doing too. But like, transparency is great, but I think just a few times every night. It's really just depends, and like. I also like to start just back and forth tweets and conversations instead of just
Not regarding us.
yeah, just like right up like hitting them. But yeah, it's just there's a lot of different ways that I would say just not going over. Like Twitter's can be really good and a strong tool to use, especially for PR, but it could be so easily abused so quickly. So I think it's just finding like that fine balance. And as the more you do it, the more like you'll see like what works, what doesn't work, what's comfortable to you, and stuff like that. Cool. If you have any questions, I sit on the other side. A lot of the guys email me, or you can.